Do you like modding your retro game consoles? Are you ready to take your modding skills to a whole new level? Get ready, because I'm going to take you deep into the world of mold making. Today, I'll show you step by step how to make clear molds so that you can quickly cast your very own resin parts for your Famicom. Hi, my name is Scruffy Looking RGB, and I like to show you interesting ways to mod your retro game console. I also take you on hunts around Japan in search of retro video games, so if that piques your interest, I'll leave a link in the description. But now, on to today's modding video. Before we start, here is a list of tools and supplies you'll need. Go ahead and take a screenshot so that you can have this for later reference. Get out your Famicom. If you're not sure how to remove the buttons, check out my video here where I dismantle an AV mod of Famicom. Step 1. Choose your buttons. Make sure they're in the best condition possible, because if your buttons have any scratches on them, the scratches will show up in the final castings, which is something you definitely don't want. So choose carefully. Step 2. Make your mold boxes. You can use many different things to make mold boxes. I've chosen micro blocks and foam board here because that's what I happen to have on hand. Box size should be just big enough to fit the buttons or the item that you want to make a mold of. If it's too big, it will be a waste of silicone. It's best to keep it small as possible since silicone can be quite expensive. I've made mine here with micro blocks. The dimensions are 4 by 4 by 4. Also on my foam boxes, the dimensions are 5 by 5 by 5 and also 6 by 6 by 6. So I have 3 different sizes here. Cut your squares from the foam board. Here I'm using my first box as a template to speed things along. After you have all your squares cut up, then attach them together using hot glue. I like to put mine together like this. I think it makes the structure a bit stronger this way, but do it however you feel comfortable. Step 3. Prepare your buttons. This is where the clay working tools and plastilina clay come in handy. The inside of the Famicom buttons are hollow, but we want to fill them with clay a little so they come out solid. This will make for a better looking button. First, tear off a little bit of clay and push it down into the button cavity using a finger or toothpick or some sort of clay working tool, like the one I'm using here. This one cost me 100 yen, and as you can see, it's been used a lot, but anything will work really, just whatever you feel comfortable with. If you plan on doing this a lot, it might be a good idea to invest in some nicer tools. Make sure you keep the clay lower than this point here so that you'll have room for the space between the button membranes and the PCB board. After they're filled in, attach the buttons to the bottom of your foam board using a dab of hot glue. I got this idea from North Gaming Supply, who has a great set of tutorials on how to create molds for your own GameCube controllers. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested. Please check it out. Last, clean your buttons of the clay residue and fingerprints before you pour. Now attach the bottom foam board with buttons. Make sure the seal is tight with hot glue so none of the silicone seeps out when pouring. Step 4. Now it's time to weigh and pour your silicone. Make sure you thoroughly read the instructions about cure time and any warnings. I'm using Zoukeimura clear silicone so that when we get to injecting a UV resin, the clear silicone will allow the UV lamps to penetrate the mold and we can get super quick demolding times. This silicone comes with a hardening agent, so 100 grams of silicone takes 10 grams of hardening agent. It's good to measure how much silicone you think you're going to use. I kind of eyeballed it here. Zero out the scale after placing the cup on the scale. Add your silicone. Go slow or else you'll go over the amount you want. I originally wanted 50 grams but went a bit over. Instead of 5 grams of hardening agent, I'm going to be using 7 since we have 70 grams in the cup. Add your hardening agent with the dropper tool. Now take your stick and mix it thoroughly. I have to give a big shout out to Rourke from Rourke's Retro Corner. He makes amazing custom shells and buttons for Game Boys, NES controllers, and a variety of consoles. He has also been very supportive in my question and endeavors, so check out his channel and website. He does fantastic work. Finally, pour your silicone into the mold box. It's best to have a nice and steady stream. The thinner, the smoother the stream, the easier it is for the bubbles to work their way out. You want the least amount of bubbles inside the silicone mold. Bubbles will cause imperfections in your final castings, so it's important to avoid them whenever you can. The hardening process starts to take place about 30 minutes after mixing the hardening agent, so you have about a 30-minute window to pour your mold. Curing time is about 24 hours, so we'll come back in 24 hours. Step 5. Separate your mold from the box. My buddy over at Rocker Gaming says that a little IPA really helps with unsticking hot glue. And man is he right. Thanks Rocker Gaming. He does a lot of awesome GameCube controller mods and has given me a lot of advice about making molds. So please go and check out his tutorials. He does really great videos. We're going to add a little IPA and let it work its way into the crevices and creases and to make quick work of these boxes. They come right off. I have found it much easier to use small plastic cubes that I found at the 100 yen store, which make things much more simple and they're about the size that I want, but foam board works just fine. It just takes so much time to rebuild each box every time you need one. Okay, now it's time to inspect our molds, clean up any little bits of resin that seeped underneath where you don't want it. Now we're going to add some registration. Step 6. Registration keeps the mold together when you inject the resin. Unfortunately, I didn't add any to my button mold here. Now that I do actually regret it. But let's take a look at the D-pad mold on how to add your registration. I just used this 100 yen shop bore. It's not actually a bore, but it works as a bore. Just push it down into the mold, pull out the bits that come loose and clip them off. So that'll leave you a nice little hole there. So when you pour the top half, you'll have little nice registration points there. It'll keep the mold from sliding around when you put the two halves together. Rebuild your boxes around the mold. I have to give a big shout out to the craftsman. He's so inspirational and I connect with his content on so many levels. If you like nostalgic toys and making molds, he has some entertaining videos you should really check out. Test to make sure it's snug so no silicone seeps through. Step number 7. Mold release. This is a very important step before you pour the second half of your mold. You need a mold release agent. In my case, I use Vaseline, which is perfectly fine to use. Just put a dab onto a cotton swab and apply it liberally around the top side of the mold. Then just go over your pieces again to make sure there's not a thick layer on, not too thick of a layer on them. And that's pretty much it. Step 8. Pouring the second half of your mold. Go ahead and calculate how much silicone you'll need. In my case, I don't need as much silicone for the second half of the mold, so I'm just adjusting accordingly, remembering how much you used during the first half. Then repeat step 4. We're gonna wait another 24 hours for it to cure.
You know, sometimes I amaze even myself.
Step 9. Take your molds out of the box and separate the two halves of your mold to remove your silicone molds from your boxes. Okay, if you did a good job with the mold release, it should be fairly easy to separate the two halves of the mold. Take your time and work it around slowly. Once you have separated the two halves, take out your buttons and check the inside of the mold for bubbles that may have appeared during the curing process. Our buttons look really nice. There are no bubbles inside our mold. As you can see here, this D-pad that I did actually had some bubbles in it. So this is not going to be any good for casting as it will show imperfections. But I did do more than one, so here is another one that actually looks fine. So we're ready to go for the next step. Step number 10, boring holes for syringe injection points. Now this is where you need to choose the location for the injection points for your syringe. I have chosen these areas here. Using a metal syringe tip, I bore out the holes by just pushing them into each one of these points here. Got your injection point. Also, since the tip of the syringe is a little bit thicker, you're gonna have to cut just a little bit around the edges so that it will fit into the hole there. And just take your craft knife, twist it around there, pull out the little cones of silicone. You've got your injection points completed. Go ahead and take a look at and admire your silicone molds. After 2 days of mold making and curing, you're ready to do some UV resin casting.
You know, sometimes I amaze even myself.
Question of the day. Do any of you out there plan on trying this mod out? Let me know down in the comments. If you do planning on making your own clear silicone molds, what console will you make them for? Thank you all for checking out this video. I'll be adding a part 2 where I'll focus on the casting process and how to mix dyes and powders into your casting. Thank you all for sticking around to the end of this video. It was a long one, but I hope it was either helpful or entertaining to you. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with a friend because that really helps my channel grow and keeps me pushing to put out more awesome content. So stay safe out there, happy modding, but above all, stay scruffy looking.
Who's scruffy looking?